How unfortunate. A nurse's voice drifted through the sterile corridor of New York Presbyterian, soft as a whisper. She practically owns half of Manhattan, and yet her visitor list is empty. No family, no friends. The other nurse sighed quietly. All the money in the world can't buy her a kidney. Without a donor, she might not make it through the month. Those words floated down the hallway, slipped through the pale gray glow of fluorescent lights, and reached the ears of Edward Ned Ashford, a man hunched over on a hard plastic chair, hidden in a shadowed corner. His heart pounded, but not for the unknown woman in that private suite nearby. His whole world was just a few doors away, a small room where a 7-year-old world had woken up an hour ago, gasping and trembling. Poppy. He could still hear the sharp, high-pitched wheeze of every breath, still see those wide, terrified blue eyes as she fought for air. He had scooped her into his arms, his heart lodged in his throat, and sped through the streets of Queens faster than he ever had before, streetlights blurring into streaks of white and amber through a veil of tears. Now, Poppy lay in the examination room, attached to a nebulizer, while he sat outside, waiting, counting the frozen silences between her ragged breaths and the doctor's coming verdict. If you find yourself holding your breath alongside Ned and Poppy, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss what comes next. We're about to reach the moment that changes everything. When a struggling single father begins to wonder, what could drive a man to offer a piece of his own body to save a total stranger? 3 days earlier, morning light filtered through the curtains of a small apartment in Sunnyside. Ned stood by the stove, carefully cutting the crusts off a sandwich. Poppy wouldn't eat them, and he'd learned that after countless half-eaten lunches. From the table came the faint scratch of a pencil on paper. He glanced over his shoulder. Poppy, her blonde hair a tousled mess, sat in purple pajamas covered with stars, mumbling to herself as she colored in her sketchbook. A field of daisies, as always. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Poppy looked up, grinning, the gap where her front tooth used to be shining through. "Mom, Daddy, Mom loves daisies, right?" Ned felt his chest tighten. He set the knife down, wiped his hands on the dish towel, and knelt beside her, eye to eye. "Yes, honey." Mom loved daisies. He gently touched the drawing, simple white flowers drawn with wax crayons, but to him they were the whole world. "You're drawing them to make Mom happy?" Poppy nodded solemnly. "So she knows I miss her." Ned kissed the top of her head, his throat tightening. "She knows, sweetheart. She always knows." Poppy bent back over her page, and Ned stood up, unconsciously brushing his fingers over his left wrist, where a small daisy tattoo had faded over 7 years. He and Eleanor had gotten it one impulsive autumn afternoon before Poppy was born. Before the illness came, before everything changed. "Daddy, why are you sad?" "It's nothing, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about Mom. Mom's in heaven, right?" "Yes, love." "And she can see me?" "Always. She's always watching you, and she loves you very much." Poppy smiled, returning to her daisies. Ned turned back to the kitchen, finished the sandwich, and packed it neatly into a pink lunchbox covered with daisy stickers. Routine. The small daily rituals that kept him from thinking too much. But today felt different. There was something heavy in the air, an unspoken weight he couldn't name. He closed the lunchbox, set it beside Poppy's water bottle, and glanced toward the table. Her daisy field nearly filled the page, the round sun beaming over a pale yellow sky. In the corner, Poppy had written carefully in pencil, "For Mom, Poppy." Ned drew in a long breath. The smell of toasted bread, wax crayons, and morning air in the small apartment blended together, achingly familiar. He told himself everything was fine. Just finish the little tasks ahead. Tuck the lunchbox into her backpack. Check the inhaler, jacket, keys, everything in place. Only when his hand touched the doorknob did that uneasy feeling, light as a drifting wind, brush the back of his neck. Something about today would be different, though he didn't know why. But one thing he was sure of. Whatever came, he and Poppy would face it together, same time. 1 Vanderbilt, Manhattan. 40 floors above ground, Victoria Pembroke stood before the glass wall of her corner office, gazing at the city sprawling beneath her like a tapestry of light. She owned this building, and 12 others within sight. Yet at this moment, the only thing occupying her mind was the phone that had just vibrated on her desk. She picked it up. Dr. Amelia Reed's voice came through, calm, but with a hard edge beneath the final consonants. "Victoria, we need to talk about your latest test results." She had expected it. Her body had been warning her all week. Unexplained fatigue, the dull ache along her lower back, the heaviness in her calves, the swelling around her ankles that no pair of designer heels could hide. "How bad is it?" "Your creatinine levels have hit a critical mark. Both kidneys are failing. You need dialysis immediately and, Victoria, you'll need a transplant." Victoria closed her eyes. 52 years old. From a tiny office in Brooklyn, she had built Hudson Quant Systems into a $12 billion fintech empire. 30 years of relentless work. No pauses, no boundaries. And now, her body was betraying her. "I'll find a donor," she said, her voice still measured, perfectly controlled. "Money isn't the issue." "Victoria, the waiting list is long, and with your blood type—" "I don't wait in lines, Dr. Reed. I'll find a way." A brief silence hummed at the other end. Then the doctor spoke again, her tone softer. "I understand, but you need to start dialysis now. This can't wait." When the call ended, Victoria remained motionless before the glass. Outside, the city pulsed with motion, millions of lives rushing forward in their small, relentless rhythms. And she, the woman who could buy almost anything, couldn't buy the one thing she needed most. She looked down at her hands. Hands that had signed hundreds of contracts, shaken thousands of hands, built an empire from nothing. They were trembling. For the first time in 30 years, Victoria Pembroke felt fear. Not the fear of a failed deal or a ruthless competitor, but something raw, elemental. Time. The limits of a human body. She steadied herself by placing her fingertips on the edge of the desk, drawing a slow breath, gathering her composure as if collecting loose papers after a sudden gust of wind. Below her, Manhattan still blazed with light. Up here, a thin shadow had just sliced through her pride. And for the first time, she was forced to admit, there are battles money cannot win. Back to the present. New York Presbyterian, 2:00 a.m. Ned hadn't felt this kind of fear since the night Eleanor died. Poppy's asthma attack was the worst it had ever been. The emergency inhaler did nothing. She wheezed and sobbed, hiccuping for air, her fingernails pale from oxygen loss. In the ambulance, Ned held her tiny hand tight, whispering prayers he didn't even know he still remembered. Now, after 3 frantic hours and an IV dose of corticosteroids, Poppy was finally asleep. Her oxygen level was steady, her breathing even. But Dr. Amelia Reed, the same doctor who was also overseeing a patient upstairs on the 7th floor, had asked Ned to step into the hallway. "Mr. Ashford, I'll be honest with you," she began. This is Poppy's 5th hospitalization this year. Her asthma is worsening. Ned nodded, his throat dry. We're doing everything we can, but she needs a more stable environment. No stress, no allergens. She paused, choosing her words carefully. And the medication costs? How are you managing them? Ned hesitated. I'm managing. But they both knew the truth. Poppy's maintenance medication cost $300 a month, even after insurance. His night shift janitorial job brought in $2,200. Rent was $1,100. Then food, utilities, school supplies. Nothing left. There never was. I just want you to know, Dr. Reed said gently, there are assistance programs available. And if you ever need— I'm fine, he cut in, too quickly. Thank you. But I can handle it. She nodded, her eyes firm yet kind. No argument, no judgment. When she left, Ned sank back into the chair, resting his head against the wall. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Buzz, buzz. A sharp, grating sound. Somewhere nearby, a monitor beeped steadily, like an invisible clock ticking away. Then came the soft voices of 2 nurses passing by. Such a shame. She owns half of Manhattan, and no one comes to visit. Ned looked up, watching the 2 blue scrubs fade into the far end of the corridor. If she doesn't get a donor, she won't make it through the month. He didn't know why those words struck him so deeply. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the echo of fear still trembling in his chest. Or maybe it was because he remembered too vividly what it felt like to sit beside Eleanor's hospital bed, holding her hand in the dark, knowing he could do nothing. No one should have to face that alone. That was what Eleanor had told him in her final days, when she sat beside the bed of the woman in the next room, a woman with no family, and quietly held her hand. No one deserves to face death alone, Ned. Promise me that. He had promised. Back then, he hadn't understood what it truly meant. But now, sitting in this hallway, skin numb from the cold, he finally did. Ned stood up before he could talk himself out of it. His feet seemed to move on their own, carrying him toward the main nurse's station. The middle-aged nurse behind the desk, silver hair cropped short, kind eyes lit by the monitor's glow, looked up. "Can I help you, sir?" Ned cleared his throat. The words jammed somewhere between his chest and his mouth, as if something inside him resisted letting them go. I heard there's someone who needs a kidney transplant." Her expression softened, though her gaze turned a shade more cautious. "You mean the patient on the 7th floor?" Ned nodded. "I'd like to be tested, to see if I'm a match." A few heartbeats of silence passed. The nurse studied his face, as if searching for a hidden motive, a trick, an angle, anything that could explain the simple, impossible offer that had just left his lips. "Do you know the patient?" "No. You understand this is major surgery, right? There are real risks, and recovery takes time." "I understand." "And you still want to?" Ned thought of Poppy, sleeping in the room just 50 steps away. Of Dr. Reed's voice. The medication costs. How are you managing them? Of the stack of bills piled on the kitchen table, red numbers glaring up at him like silent accusations. Then he thought of Eleanor, the way she'd lain in this very hospital, in this same building, his hand gripping hers as he whispered, "Don't leave me alone." But she had left, and he had carried that helplessness in his hands ever since. No one deserved to go through that alone. "Yes," he said, his voice clearer than he expected. "I still want to." The nurse held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly, like sealing a solemn agreement. "All right, Mr. Ashford, let's get you a form and draw some blood." When she turned away, Ned placed both hands on the counter to steady himself. His heart pounded like a drum. What had he just done? What had he just promised? But beneath the fear and doubt, something else was stirring. Something clean, certain. For the first time since Eleanor's death, Ned felt he was doing something that truly mattered. Something meaningful, not just for the stranger on the 7th floor, but for the part of himself that grief had long since buried in dust. 48 hours later, Ned stood at the sink in the tiny break room of Hudson Quant's basement, emptying a packet of instant coffee into a foam cup. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. Manhattan area code. He knew immediately who it was. "Mr. Ashford? This is Dr. Reed from New York Presbyterian." Ned set the cup down, his hand trembling slightly. "Yes, I'm here. We've received your preliminary test results." He closed his eyes. Behind the thin darkness of his eyelids appeared Poppy's face, her gap-toothed smile, the same blue eyes as Eleanor's. A thought flashed through him. What if something happens to me? "Mr. Ashford?" "Yes," he said, pulling himself back to the moment. "I'm still here." "The results?" Dr. Reed paused. In that silence, Ned felt the whole room tilt slightly. "This is an exact match. The compatibility level we're seeing, honestly, it's the best-case scenario. Better even than between siblings." Ned opened his eyes. The fluorescent light in the break room suddenly felt blinding. "What does that mean?" "It means, if you still wish to proceed, we can schedule surgery within 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 14 days until he would lie on an operating table and give part of his body to a total stranger." "Mr. Ashford, do you need time to think about it?" Ned looked toward the small high window, the only one in the basement. Outside, hurried feet crossed the Manhattan sidewalk, everyone moving toward something, somewhere, with purpose. "No," he said, his voice steadier than he expected. "I don't need time. Schedule the surgery." His shoulders dropped. His hand found the foam cup again. The cheap coffee smell rose. Sharp, ordinary, grounding. His heart was still racing, but something inside him had clicked into place, perfectly aligned. On the other end, Dr. Reed outlined the next steps, her voice firm and measured. Ned listened, nodded, memorizing every date, every form, every appointment. When the call ended, he stayed still for a moment, watching the thin stream of water run into the sink. Above him, the city kept rushing forward. Down here, in the basement, a decision had just changed the course of a life. Maybe 2. Victoria woke after her first dialysis session, feeling as though someone had drained every drop of blood from her body and pumped cement back in. Every muscle ached, her mind was foggy, her mouth desert dry. Worse than the physical pain was the silence. The room was spacious, a VIP suite overlooking the East River, leather sofa, flat-screen TV, and utterly empty. No flowers, no cards, no one in the chair beside her bed. Her phone buzzed. Work emails. Always work. She swiped them away. For the first time in 30 years, she didn't care about market shifts or quarterly reports. Dr. Amelia Reed entered, the same professional smile on her face. Yet something new flickered in her eyes, a spark of real hope. "Victoria, I have good news." Victoria sat up too quickly, the world spinning. "We've found a donor." 3 words hit like a jolt of electricity. Victoria stared, speechless. "Who?" "A living donor, anonymous. He came in voluntarily 3 days ago. We've just completed the cross-match." Victoria shook her head, as if she could shake off some misunderstanding. There's no such thing as anonymous. Everyone wants something. Money, a favor, a spotlight. What's he asking for? Dr. Reed pulled a chair closer. Nothing. He's asked for absolutely nothing. He doesn't even want you to know his name. His only condition is that the donation remains completely anonymous. Ridiculous. I know it sounds impossible, the doctor said softly. But there are people like that, Victoria. People who give simply because it's the right thing to do. Victoria turned toward the window. Outside, the setting sun stained the river a molten gold. Her city, her empire, all built on one unshakable principle. Everything has a price. Every transaction has two sides. And now, someone had just broken that rule. Someone was offering her the greatest gift of all, life, without asking for anything in return. She felt something crack inside her chest. Not pain, but the slow thawing of a hardness that had lived there for too long. A tear slid down her cheek. For the first time in 30 years, Victoria Pembroke, the woman who had never once cried in a boardroom, wept. She brushed the tear with the back of her hand, startled, as if meeting a stranger version of herself. Somewhere far from spreadsheets and market graphs, there existed a world that ran on rules money could never buy. And here, in this quiet room overlooking the East River, she had to face a truth she'd long refused to see. There are debts that cannot be paid with contracts, only answered by learning how to receive and to be grateful. 5:47 a.m. Ned lay on the hospital gurney, clothed in a thin blue gown, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Mrs. Gable, the kind neighbor watching Poppy, had called him 10 minutes ago. His daughter's sleepy, gentle voice came through the phone. "Love you, Daddy. Love you more." Their little game. It was always more. But this time, Ned wasn't sure it was true anymore. A nurse appeared beside him, smiling warmly. "Ready, Mr. Ashford?" No, but he nodded anyway. They began to wheel him down the corridor. The ceiling slid past above him. White panels, fluorescent lights, more lights. Ned counted each one, holding on to the rhythm like a lifeline. Anything to keep from thinking about Poppy waking up and finding him gone. Anything to keep from thinking about the possibility he might never wake up again. 3 floors above Victoria lay on her own gurney, staring up at the ceiling too. Her room was larger, more luxurious, but the feeling of smallness was the same. Dr. Reed held her hand. "We'll take good care of you." Victoria nodded. Her mouth was so dry she couldn't form words. She thought of the anonymous man somewhere in this hospital, lying on another table, looking at the same ceiling, about to give her a piece of his own body. Who was he, she wondered. Why? Did he have a family? Was someone holding his hand? But she didn't ask. That was the rule. Anonymity. They would remain strangers forever. Operating rooms 3 and 5, 6:15 a.m. The anesthesia flowed through Ned's veins like a cold wave. The world began to slide away, voices fading, lights stretching into streaks. The last thing he thought of was Eleanor. They were standing in a field of daisies the summer they first met. Sunlight caught in her golden hair, her smile radiant. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered. "I'm proud of you, Ned." Then, darkness. 2 surgeries side by side. In operating room 3, Dr. Reed's team carefully removed Ned's left kidney, a small, pink, bean-shaped organ, a biological miracle. In operating room 5, another team prepared Victoria, clearing away what no longer worked, making room for life anew. 6:47 a.m. The kidney traveled down the hall in a sterile container. 7:03 a.m. It was placed inside Victoria's body. The vessels were connected. Blood began to flow. 7:11 a.m. The kidney flushed pink. It began to work. A new life, born from a quiet act of sacrifice. Ned woke up in pain. Not the kind of pain he'd known before. Not a headache, not a sore back. This was deeper, stranger, as if someone had opened a door inside his body and forgotten to close it. "Mr. Ashford?" A distant voice. Then a face came into focus. A young nurse with kind eyes. "The surgery went well. You did great." "Poppy," the word rasped out, dry and cracked. "Your daughter's fine. Mrs. Gable just called. Poppy's having breakfast and asking when you'll be home." Ned closed his eyes. A single hot tear rolled down his cheek. His little girl was waiting for him. 3 floors above Victoria woke to a completely different kind of silence. Not the hollow, lonely quiet of before, but a peaceful one, as if her body, for the first time in months, was breathing in rhythm again. She placed her hand on her abdomen, over the white bandage covering the incision. Beneath the skin, beneath the muscles and tissue, something new was there, a part of someone else, alive, working, saving her. Who was he? The question whispered in her mind, not urgent, not loud, just soft and persistent. Who was he? And why would he do such a thing? That afternoon, Dr. Reed entered the room carrying good news. "Your body is accepting the kidney beautifully. Better than we hoped. How's the donor?" "He's doing well too, recovering nicely." A pause. Then, "I want to know who he is." Dr. Reed shook her head gently. "Victoria, you know I can't—" "I know the policy, but—" She stopped, searching for words. "I owe him, not just my life. I owe him gratitude, acknowledgement, something. The best gift you can give him," the doctor said softly, "is respecting his wish for privacy." But the answer did not soothe Victoria. She had spent 30 years building an empire on information, knowing who was who, what they wanted, how the pieces fit together until the whole picture made sense. And now, the most crucial piece of her life was an absolute mystery. That, she decided, was unacceptable. 3 days after being discharged, Victoria sat in her penthouse office on the Upper East Side and dialed a number she had once sworn she'd never call again. Rupert Hale answered on the first ring. "Ms. Pembroke." His voice was deep, smooth, professional. "It's been a while. I need you to find someone." A brief pause. On the other end came the faint, rhythmic tapping of keys. "Who?" "I don't know his name, or his face, but he was at New York Presbyterian from the 18th to the 24th of last month. He donated a kidney. Blood type O negative. Male, probably between 25 and 40. "That's vague." "It's all I have." A thin sigh drifted through the line. "Ms. Pembroke, the hospital has strict confidentiality protocols for anonymous donors." "There's a reason for that." "I know. And you still want me to break them?" Victoria turned toward the glass wall. The city sprawled beneath her. Millions of lights scattered against the dark. Each light, a life. Each life, a story. One of them belonged to him, the man who had saved her. "He gave me my life," she said softly. "I just want to know his name. I need to know why." "Why does it matter so much?" "Because—" her voice faltered, tightening in her throat. "Because for the first time in my life, someone gave me something I couldn't buy, couldn't earn, couldn't measure. And I don't know what to do with that." A heavy silence followed. Then Rupert said, "I'll see what I can do." "Thank you, Rupert." "But, Ms. Pembroke." He paused for a beat. "If I find him, be prepared." You might not like the answer. What do you mean? I mean, maybe he wanted to stay anonymous for a reason. And once you learn that reason, you might wish you'd never gone looking. 10 days after the surgery, Ned returned to Hudson Quant. He'd told Mr. Delaney it was a slipped disc, a minor procedure, nothing serious. But as he pushed the heavy janitorial cart down the 42nd floor hallway, cold sweat trickled down his spine. The incision along his side burned, tugging with every movement, as if the stitches were on fire. He stopped, leaned against the wall, and drew in a slow, deliberate breath. "You all right, Ned?" He looked up. Mr. Delaney stood nearby, concern etched across his face. "Yes, sir," Ned said quickly. "Just a little tired." "You sure you're ready to be back? You still look—" "I'm fine," Ned cut in, his tone firm. "I need this shift." It was true. He'd already lost 10 days' pay. Poppy's hospital bill was still waiting. Her next week's medication wasn't going to buy itself. He had no choice but to come back. "All right," Mr. Delaney said slowly, "but if you need to leave early—" "I'm fine," Ned repeated. When the manager finally walked away, Ned closed his eyes, counted to 10, and pushed the cart onward. Every step was a negotiation with pain. Every time he bent to empty a bin, it was a battle of willpower. But he needed the job. He needed the paycheck. So he gritted his teeth and kept moving. 2 a.m. 52nd floor, executive level. Ned was mopping the reception area when the elevator doors slid open. Instinctively, he stepped back into the shadows, a habit ingrained after 6 months on the night shift. People in his line of work weren't meant to be seen. They were the invisible ones. But this time, he couldn't help looking. A woman stepped out, tall, slender, wrapped in a cream-colored cashmere coat. Her silver-streaked hair was tied neatly back. She moved with quiet confidence, though something about her was different, lighter, slower, like someone emerging from a storm. Victoria Pembroke. Ned recognized her instantly. Everyone in the building did. Her portrait hung in the lobby. Her name appeared on every memo. But he'd never seen her in person. Until now. And she was walking straight toward him. Or rather, toward the section of floor he was cleaning. Ned lowered his head, moving the mop faster, silently praying she'd pass without noticing. But she stopped. "Working this late?" Her voice wasn't as cold as he'd imagined. It was soft, almost curious. "Yes, ma'am," he said without looking up. "This building looks spotless. Thank you for your work." "You're welcome, ma'am." A pause. He could feel her gaze lingering, assessing, thoughtful. "What's your name?" His heartbeat quickened. Every syllable seemed heavy. "Edward, ma'am. But everyone calls me Ned." "Ned," she repeated, testing the sound of it. "Good evening, Ned." Then she turned and disappeared through the door to her private office. Ned stood frozen, heart still pounding. She'd spoken to him. Victoria Pembroke, the woman who might now be living with his kidney inside her, had just asked his name, and he had answered. 2 weeks after their brief midnight encounter in the hallway, Rupert Hale called Victoria at 11 p.m. "Ms. Pembroke, forgive the late call, but I thought you'd want to hear this right away." Victoria set her book down and straightened on the sofa, her pulse quickening. "You found him?" "I believe so. Male, O negative blood type. Medical leave matching the time frame. I cross-checked staff records from every company within a 5-mile radius of the hospital." Victoria rose, walking toward the window. Outside, Manhattan shimmered like an upside-down sky of stars. "What's his name?" "Edward Ashford, 34. Goes by Ned." "Ned," she repeated softly, tasting the name as if testing its weight. Where does he work? A short pause. Then Rupert said, In your own building, Ms. Pembroke. Hudson Quant. He's on the night cleaning crew, responsible for everything from the basement to the 60th floor. The air in the room seemed to thin. He works for me? Has for 6 months. Requested medical leave on the 18th of last month, citing a scheduled minor procedure. Returned on the 28th. Exactly 10 days. The standard recovery window for a living kidney donor. Victoria leaned her forehead against the cold glass. The man who had saved her life. He was here, inside her tower. Perhaps right now, quietly mopping a floor somewhere below. Anything else? Rupert hesitated. He's a widower. His wife passed 3 years ago from ovarian cancer. Name was Eleanor Clark. Died at New York Presbyterian after 7 months of treatment. The same hospital. Yes. Victoria closed her eyes. Now she understood. Not with logic, but with something far deeper. He had once sat beside a hospital bed, holding the hand of the woman he loved, watching her fade, helpless, alone. And when he heard of another woman facing the same fate, he couldn't let it happen again. Does he have children? She asked, her voice tight. A daughter, Poppy, 7 years old, severe chronic asthma, multiple hospitalizations this year. Poppy. There's one more thing, Ms. Pembroke. Victoria waited. A pre-op nurse recalled that, while waiting for the doctor, the donor had doodled something on his consent form. She was curious and took a quick look. It was a flower. Simple, clumsy lines. What kind of flower? A daisy. Victoria opened her eyes. The city outside blurred through the sheen of her tears. Of course, she whispered. A daisy. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She sat before her laptop, searching for any public trace of Eleanor Clark. There wasn't much. Just a short obituary on a small Queens local paper. Eleanor Marie Clark Ashford, age 29, passed away on March 14th after a courageous battle with cancer. Remembered for her radiant smile, her love of daisies, and her devotion to her family. Survived by her husband Edward and daughter Poppy, age 4. 4 years old. Poppy had only been 4 when her mother died. Victoria found a few photographs on old, inactive social media accounts. Profiles Ned had likely abandoned long ago. One wedding photo, a younger Ned smiling brightly beside a beautiful blonde woman in a white dress. Both of them holding a bouquet of daisies. One family photo, Ned cradling Eleanor and a tiny baby. Sunlight spilling over their hair in a field of flowers. And the last one, Eleanor in a hospital room, frail and bald from chemotherapy, yet still smiling. On the bedside table lay a single daisy. Victoria stared at that face, the woman she'd never met, for a long, long time, and something within her shifted. Eleanor knew what it felt like to lie still in that sterile room, afraid, alone, wondering whether she'd live to see her child grow up. And Victoria, she had just lain in those same rooms, felt that same fear. But there was one difference. Eleanor had Ned beside her, holding her hand, whispering to her, fighting alongside her. Victoria had no one. Until Ned, the man who had lost Eleanor, decided that no one else should face that fear alone. Victoria closed the laptop and placed her hand over her chest. Beneath her fingertips, her heartbeat was steady, each beat powered by a kidney that once belonged to a man who had loved Eleanor so deeply that, 3 years after losing her, the pain within him still burned bright enough to move him to an act of extraordinary grace. How could she ever thank him for that? How could she possibly repay a gift born out of love and loss? She didn't know. But she knew one thing. She had to find a way. For the next 3 nights, Victoria did something she had never done before. She came to the office at midnight and quietly watched Ned work. Not to confront him, not to speak, just to understand. Night 1. She found him on the 33rd floor, carefully wiping the glass panels. His movements were slow, deliberate. Each one looked like it hurt. Every few minutes, he would stop, press a hand to his left side, take a deep breath, then continue. He was still in pain. Because of her. Victoria stood in the shadows, watching him work in silence. A small, invisible job, done with quiet devotion. No one saw him. No one thanked him. But in the morning, when the building's doors opened, the floors would shine, the windows would gleam, the bins would be empty. The invisible labor of an invisible man. Night 2. She found him in the basement break room at 3 a.m. He sat alone, eating a sandwich wrapped in plastic. Next to him, taped neatly inside his locker door, was a drawing. Poppy's drawing. A field of daisies, with 3 flowers standing taller than the rest. Victoria understood. 1 for Eleanor, 1 for Poppy, 1 for him. He sat there, looking at the drawing as he chewed slowly, a tired but peaceful face. This was his meal. Alone, in the middle of the night, in the middle of his shift. Victoria thought of her own dinners. 5-star restaurants, expensive wine, empty conversation. And suddenly, she envied him. Envied the simplicity of this moment. A man, a sandwich, and his daughter's drawing. Night 3. She heard him on the phone. He stood by the small window, the only one that let in a trace of the city's night light. His voice was low and warm. "Poppy, sweetheart, I know you're scared, but remember what Daddy told you? When you can't breathe, you imagine Mommy's right beside you. She's holding your hand." A pause. He listened. "No, honey, she's not far away. She's always here, in your heart. And Daddy is too. I'm always here." Another pause. "How much do you love Daddy?" A soft chuckle. "Wow, that much? Well, Daddy loves you twice as much." A tiny giggle came through the line. "Okay, now you need to sleep. Mrs. Gable's waiting. Daddy'll be home at 7 to make breakfast. How about daisy pancakes, deal?" When he hung up, he stayed there for a long time, looking out the window into the night. The light from below traced the lines of his face, weary, anxious, yet illuminated by something unbreakable. Love, pure, unguarded, unconditional love for his little girl. And in that moment, Victoria understood. Ned hadn't given her his kidney despite having so little love left in him. He had given it because he had so much love inside him, he could still give it away, even when he had almost nothing else. The following weekend, Bryant Park, Community Health Fair. Victoria hadn't planned to do anything more than watch from a distance. She arrived at Bryant Park in a wool coat and sunglasses, blending easily into the crowd. Hudson Quant was one of the main sponsors, but she had sent the PR team to represent the company in her place. She only wanted to see them, Ned and Poppy, in the daylight, in the rhythm of their ordinary life. She found them near the duck pond. Ned sat on a bench, wearing a faded flannel shirt and jeans. Poppy sat beside him, her blonde hair tied into 2 pigtails, a purple hoodie pulled up around her face. Between them sat a paper bag of popcorn they were sharing. They looked happy. Not the glossy, picture-perfect kind of happiness, but a quiet, simple one. A father and daughter, sharing a Saturday morning together. Victoria was about to leave. She'd seen enough. She had no right to intrude further. When Poppy began to cough. At first, It was just a dry, small cough. Then another. Then another. Ned was alert immediately, his hand on her back. Poppy's coughs came faster, sharper, her breaths turning shallow. He lifted her onto his lap and pulled the inhaler from his backpack. Okay, Poppy Flower. Slow breaths, sweetheart. Daddy's here. But her wheezing only worsened. Her face flushed, then paled. Her wide blue eyes were filled with panic. People nearby stopped. Someone asked, "Do you need an ambulance?" Victoria didn't think. Her body simply moved. 30 years of conditioning in crisis mode. She rushed forward and knelt beside them, level with Poppy's eyes. "Hey there," she said, calm but warm. "It's me, Victoria. Do you remember me?" Poppy looked up at her through tears and nodded faintly. "Good girl. Now, I'm going to help you, but you have to trust me, all right?" Another nod. Victoria took the child's trembling hand and placed it against her own chest. "Feel that? I'm breathing. Try to breathe with me, okay?" She inhaled slowly, exaggerated, steady, and exhaled. In and out. That's it. Just like that. Ned timed it perfectly, pressing the inhaler as Poppy inhaled. Once, twice. Victoria kept breathing with her, never breaking eye contact, her hand still wrapped around the girl's small fingers. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, Poppy's breathing began to steady. 5 minutes later, the attack had passed. Poppy slumped against Ned's chest, exhausted, but breathing normally again. Victoria sat back on the edge of the bench, her legs trembling too much to stand. "Thank you," Ned whispered, voice breaking. I don't know what I'd have done if you weren't here." Victoria looked at him, truly looked at him in the morning light. Lines of fatigue etched around his eyes, a hint of gray at his temples. Rough hands, calloused from hard work. But his eyes, deep, warm brown, overflowed with love as they rested on his daughter. This was the man who had saved her life. Poppy looked up at Victoria. "Miss Victoria, you said you used to have asthma too, right?" Victoria nodded, a small, necessary lie. "Yes, sweetheart." "Do you still have it?" "No, I got better." "How did you get better?" Victoria glanced at Ned, then back at Poppy. "Someone helped me. Someone very kind." Poppy smiled, small and pure. "Like my daddy?" Victoria's throat tightened. "Yes." "Darling," she whispered. "Just like your daddy." That night, Victoria sat in her home office, opened her laptop, and began typing a list. Not of what she wanted to give Ned, but of what he needed. Then she called Rupert Hale. "Rupert, I need you to handle something. This must be completely discreet. No traceable connection to me." "I'm listening." "Edward Ashford has a daughter with severe asthma. The medical costs are draining his income. I want you to establish an anonymous fund." "A family fund?" "No, broader. A scholarship and medical assistance program for children of Hudson Quant employees. Structure it so that Poppy Ashford automatically qualifies, but include at least 10 other families. I don't want him to think this is charity directed at him." "Smart. How much are we talking?" $5 million to start, spread over 5 years. "And Rupert?" "Yes?" "Make sure I'm not the approving authority. Use the board. I don't ever want to see his name on any paperwork." A pause. Then Rupert said slowly, "You're protecting him from feeling indebted to you." "I'm repaying a debt that can't be repaid," she answered quietly, "by making sure he never knows it existed." 3 days later, a letter arrived at Ned's address in Sunnyside. "Dear Mr. Edward Ashford, we are pleased to inform you that your daughter, Poppy Ashford, has been selected as a recipient of the Hudson Quant Health and Education Scholarship. This program was established to support employees' families whose children face ongoing medical challenges. The scholarship includes full coverage of asthma-related medications and medical equipment, supplemental health insurance for emergencies, an annual educational grant. The scholarship takes effect immediately and will continue until Poppy reaches the age of 18. Victoria never saw Ned's reaction when he opened that letter, but she could imagine it, and that, she decided, was enough. But Victoria wasn't the only one keeping an eye on Ned. Quentin Drake, Executive Vice President of Hudson Quant, a polished, ambitious man with a cold smile, was watching too. He had noticed the changes in her, how she wandered the building late at night, how she started asking questions about employees far below her pay grade, how she vetoed his cost-cutting proposal to protect the workers. That wasn't the Victoria he knew, not the woman who had built an empire through ruthless precision and unshakable logic. So Quentin began to investigate. It didn't take long to find a trail. Victoria's discharge date from New York Presbyterian matched that of a janitor named Edward Ashford. Both had taken medical leave at the same time. Quentin didn't know about the kidney. That information was locked down tight. But he knew enough to weave a different, far more scandalous narrative: a relationship. An inappropriate connection between a recovering CEO and a low-level employee who had taken advantage of her vulnerability. He could already see the headlines. So he called an emergency board meeting. Agenda: Evaluation of CEO Victoria Pembroke's leadership conduct. Quentin's office, the night before the meeting. Quentin sat behind his desk, reviewing his presentation one last time. Slide 1. Recent irregular behavior. Slide 2. Unlogged meetings with lower-level staff. Slide 3. Suspiciously overlapping medical leave. Repeated rejection of sound business decisions. He didn't need to spell it out. Just hint. Let the board connect the dots themselves. Once Victoria fell, who would the board turn to? Quentin smiled, catching his reflection in the glass wall behind the city lights. The answer was obvious. Boardroom, 60th floor, 9 a.m. The moment Victoria stepped into the room, she knew something was wrong. 12 board members sat around the long table, faces grim and unreadable. At the head stood Quentin Drake, poised beside a glowing presentation screen. "Victoria," Quentin said smoothly, his tone polite but cold. "Thank you for joining us. Please, have a seat." She didn't. "What is this, Quentin?" "A necessary evaluation," he replied, pausing just long enough to sound measured. "We have concerns about your judgment in recent months." The screen flickered to life. Slide 1. Security footage. Timestamps. Victoria's late-night movements through the building. "You've been walking the halls between 2 and 3 a.m. at least 10 times this past month." "I couldn't sleep," she said evenly. "I walked to think." Slide 2. Employee file. Edward Ashford. "And you've had multiple conversations with a janitor." Edward Ashford. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. "And even more curious," Quentin continued, voice tightening with smug control, "Mr. Ashford took medical leave at the exact same time you did. Same dates. Same hospital." He let the implication hang in the air, just long enough for the board to draw their own conclusions. "I'm not suggesting anything improper," he said, feigning restraint. "But a CEO recovering from a medical crisis, emotionally fragile, vulnerable to influence." "Enough!" Victoria's voice cracked through the room like a whip. She strode forward, placing both hands flat on the polished oak table. "You want the truth? Here it is." She looked each board member in the eye. 2 months ago, I was dying. Both kidneys failing. No donor available. My doctors told me I had weeks to live. The room went still. And then something miraculous happened. A stranger, someone who didn't know me, didn't want anything from me, volunteered to give me one of his kidneys. She turned to Quentin. That man was Edward Ashford, the janitor you're trying to turn into a scandal. Quentin's face blanched. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, Victoria said icily, because you weren't interested in truth. You were interested in power. You saw an opportunity to strike, and you took it. She turned back to the board. You want to know why I spoke to him? Because I owe him my life. You want to know why I've changed? Because nearly dying teaches you what truly matters. Silence rippled across the table. Then Marcus William, the eldest board member, cleared his throat. Victoria, we didn't know. We're sorry. No need for apologies, she said calmly. But if this board wants to remove me for learning how to be human, be my guest. The silence deepened, heavy, decisive. Then Marcus rose to his feet. I don't think we need a vote. This meeting is adjourned. He turned toward Quentin. And I think we do need to discuss your position, Mr. Drake. That afternoon, Victoria called Ned up to her office. He entered quietly, his eyes darting around. Uneasy. It was his first time standing here in daylight, not holding a mop or a cleaning cart. Mr. Ashford, Victoria said formally, please, have a seat. Ned sat on the edge of the chair, hands folded neatly on his lap. Did I do something wrong, ma'am? Victoria walked toward the glass wall, her back to him. Beyond the pane, the city stretched endlessly, a city she now saw with different eyes. You saved my life, she said softly. Silence filled the room like a held breath. Ma'am? She turned. Her eyes were red but steady. I know, Ned. I know you were the one who donated your kidney to me. The color drained from his face. He stood abruptly, taking a step back as if caught doing something forbidden. I didn't. Don't deny it, she interrupted, not sharply, but with calm certainty. I have the records, and I need you to know. She stepped closer. I need you to know that I can never thank you enough. Not with money, not with a promotion, not with anything. Ned shook his head, tears welling. I never wanted thanks. I couldn't let someone die alone. Not after I'd already... After you lost your wife, Victoria finished gently. He nodded, wordless. They stood in stillness, two strangers bound by the quiet weight of grace. You gave me a second chance, Victoria whispered, to do better, to be better. She placed her hand over her chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath. Every beat of this heart, she said, voice trembling, is because of you. Bryant Park. A warm spring afternoon. Poppy darted across the grass, butterfly-shaped kite soaring behind her, laughter spilling through the park like sunlight in motion. Ned sat on a bench, eyes following her every step, his face softened by a quiet, contented joy. Victoria sat beside him, watching too, a small paper bag resting in her lap. She looks so much stronger now, she said softly. Ned nodded. The new medication works wonders, and that specialist the scholarship program connected us with. He's incredible. For the first time, we have an actual plan, not just emergency visits. I'm glad to hear that, Victoria replied sincerely. A comfortable silence stretched between them. Then Ned asked, What about you? How's the company? Better than I expected, she said with a faint smile. Turns out, when you actually care about your employees, they tend to work harder. Ned chuckled. Who would have thought? Victoria smiled too. Then her expression turned serious. I have something to show you. She opened the paper bag and pulled out a slim folder. What's this? A proposal. I want to expand the scholarship program, not just for Hudson Quant, but for the entire city. A foundation to help families struggling with medical and educational expenses. Ned flipped through the pages, eyes widening. This is huge. Victoria nodded. 20 million to start. 50 over the next 5 years. He looked up. Why are you showing this to me? Because I want to name it the Eleanor Clark Memorial Foundation. Ned froze, gripping the papers, his hands trembling. You can't. I can, Victoria said gently, stepping closer. And I want to. Eleanor taught you compassion. You taught it to me again. I want that story to continue. Ned stared down at the blurred lines of text as tears welled. She'd be so proud, he whispered. I think she already is, Victoria said softly. Just then, Poppy ran back toward them, her butterfly kite fluttering wildly behind. Daddy, Miss Victoria, I did it. It's flying. She stopped short when she saw the tears on Ned's face. Daddy, why are you crying? Are you sad? Ned knelt, pulling her into his arms. No, sweetheart, I'm happy. These are happy tears. Poppy turned to Victoria, curious. Did you make Daddy happy? Victoria crouched to meet her gaze. I think your daddy made me happy, actually. Poppy tilted her head, thoughtful. Do you like daisies, Miss Victoria? Victoria smiled, the kind of smile that trembles at the edges. Yes, sweetheart, I love daisies. Me too, 'cause my mommy loved them. She's in heaven, but she still sends daisies down to me. Victoria looked at Ned, then back at Poppy. You know what? I think you're right. 1 year later, the Eleanor Clark Memorial Foundation opened its first community center in Queens, not far from Ned and Poppy's apartment. It wasn't grand or gilded, but sunlight filled every corner. Hope did too. Victoria stood before a small crowd. Not CEOs or investors, but neighborhood families, the people this foundation was built to serve. Today, she began, we celebrate a woman I never met, but who changed my life. Her eyes drifted toward the front row, where Ned sat with Poppy beside him. Eleanor Clark taught her husband, and through him taught me, that kindness isn't a single act. It's a ripple, a gift given, touching one life, then another, and another. Behind her, a photo of Eleanor smiled from the wall, radiant, young, holding a bouquet of daisies. This foundation exists because Eleanor taught a man how to love selflessly. That man saved my life, and now, together, we hope to save many more. Applause filled the room, warm and thunderous. Later, as the crowd thinned, Victoria stood alone in the lobby. Sunlight streamed through glass panels etched with daisy petals, scattering golden light across the floor. Ned joined her quietly. She'd love this, he said. I hope so, Victoria murmured. They stood side by side watching the light dance. Victoria, Ned said after a while, I never asked. Do you regret it? Finding me? She turned to him, surprised. Why would I? Because I wanted to stay anonymous, and you broke that. Victoria thought for a long moment. Then she said softly, I don't regret finding you, but if I could do it again, I'd honor your choice. I'd let you remain anonymous, if that's truly what you wanted. Ned nodded slowly. I get that, but honestly, I'm glad you didn't. She blinked, startled. You're not angry with me? I was, at first, a little. But then I realized something. If I'd stayed anonymous, I'd never have known what that gift meant. I'd never have seen you standing here, alive, creating something beautiful. I'd never have seen how one small act could send ripples this far. He smiled. So, thank you for finding me and for not letting me disappear into the dark. Victoria's throat tightened. Thank you for giving me the chance to become someone better. They stood there, two people from different worlds, joined by one selfless act that had saved them both. Not romance, not blood. Something deeper. Two souls who had met at their darkest hour, and both chose the light. There are stories about romantic love. There are stories about family. And there are stories about heroes who saved the world. But this is a different kind of story. A story about two strangers from two worlds that were never meant to cross, connected by a simple act of kindness. About a man who didn't have much, but still gave everything he could. About a woman who had everything, but finally realized that true wealth can't be bought. And about a little girl, the one with the daisies, who became the bridge between two hearts. They are proof that kindness still exists, that one person can still make a difference, that giving doesn't make us poorer, it makes us richer. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can ever receive is simply the chance to give. If this story touched you, even just a little, hit like so the algorithm knows we still believe in kindness. Tap subscribe and the notification bell so you won't miss the next journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What moment of giving once changed you? Share it in the comments below. Your story might become the inspiration for the next video. And if you think someone needs to hear this story, please share it with them. Thank you for spending your time here. See you again in the next story.